Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I'm here to talk to you a very specific type of horror, and it is the horror that involves ghosts. So if you like stories about haunted places, if you like stories about ghosts, sit down because I'm gonna give you some book and some movie recommendations.
It's coffee time!
There are so many tales about ghosts and about places that are presumed to be haunted. And why is that? It is honestly a tale as old as time. Stories about ghosts have followed us for centuries. It's probably one of the more explored subgenres of horror, and it might be because of a very human thing. So we as humans probably either want to believe that our loved ones are still with us, or we really want to believe that there is something after death. We all have that feeling sometimes when we are alone in a room. We might hear something that gives us goosebumps. We tend to believe a lot more in ghosts and presence of somebody when we are by ourselves, when we are not distracted by the regular everyday noises. And today I am here to talk about ghost stories because I feel like the beginning of the year, January, February, are months that are great for this type of stories. So I'm gonna give you some book recommendations as well as some movie recommendations, and let's start first with the books. I wanted to start with a middle grade, and it's actually a trilogy. The first book in the trilogy is called City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab, and I really enjoyed the whole trilogy. The story follows Cassidy Blake. She almost died. She almost drowned. In fact, she did before she was rescued by the ghost of a boy. And ever since she came back from the dead, she has been able to walk in and out of the realm of the dead. She can see ghosts, and it is very appropriate for her because her parents actually have a TV show. They are actual paranormal investigators, and they don't even know that their own daughter can see and talk to ghosts. This is cozy and creepy, and it's a great trilogy that you can just binge. I really enjoyed it. So if you've never read it before and you are looking for a cozy, creepy, middle grade book, this is great for you because if you enjoy the first one, you still have two more to go. The next one is another middle grade. I thought, ghost stories and middle grade go so well together. I personally really enjoy middle grade ghost stories. So the next one is called Wait Till Helen Comes, and it is by Mary Downing Hall. Told in first person, we follow 12-year-old Molly as she moves with her family to Baltimore. You need to imagine that you are a 12-year-old girl that is now relocated to the middle of nowhere together with your family and your brother, and you no longer have friends there now. So it's something very upsetting for a kid. The family settles into an old church. That's where they're going to be living now, and that church has a cemetery attached to it. And the family starts to worry when the daughter, Heather, says that she has been talking to a girl called Helen, but nobody knows this girl. Nobody knows who Helen is. So we all can pretty much assume that Helen is going to be a ghost. This is another one that is creepy, it's dark, it's cozy, so it's perfect as well if you just need something easy to read. This book has also a great message that is both heart-wrenching as well as heartwarming. We're moving now from middle grade to YA, and there is a book that I read in a book club that I really enjoyed, and I didn't expect it to be so different, and that is Anna Dressed in Blood, and it is by Kendare Blake. Cass has taken over the family business, which is basically to find ghosts and help them to be released. He doesn't know where they go. He doesn't know if it's a better place or a worse place, but his job is basically to get rid of the ghosts and help them, send them to whatever is next for them. However, that kind of changes when he meets a ghost that is very different from the rest, and that is obviously Anna. Anna is now a very powerful, vengeful ghost, but she was in the past an innocent girl with a very dark past. The more Cass learns about Anna's story, the harder it is for him to do his job. And I really enjoyed that this book was very different from your typical ghost story, and the characters had a lot more depth. It was fast-paced, it had a lot of heart, and it's a very interesting supernatural story, so if you've never read this one before, I highly recommend it. For the next pick, I wanted to choose a classic so that people would also go back to the classic horror stories. We have The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters because, I mean, there is nothing better than a classic ghost story. We follow a physician that has made a name for himself, and a family calls him one day to go to their property to attend somebody that is not feeling well. It is a big mansion that had belonged to the same family for centuries, but when the physician goes in, he realizes that everything is in a very poor state of decay, and he realizes that the family went from being like this rich, amazing family to now being basically in shambles. As he's there in this house to treat the patient, there's a lot of little accidents that happen around the house, a lot of strange occurrences. This is your classic historical gothic fiction tale, so this is for the people that are looking for more of a classic story. Next we have The House on Cold Hill by Peter James, and this is one that I personally found very creepy and very unsettling. The plot is fairly simple. We follow a family that, yes, moved to a new home when they realize that there is something wrong in the place. There are noises, strange shadows, something is in the house with them. But it had a great atmosphere and great twist, and it's one that I still remember really, really enjoying. It might not be the scariest story that you will ever read, but the tension in this one is top notch, and it really kept me at the edge of my seat, and I was really invested with this family that was unable to leave this house, and I really enjoyed it, so I do recommend this one. Next we have another one that is kind of a classic story, and that is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. I think that a lot of people are familiar with it or have already read it. This is another classic gothic story, and we follow Elsie. She marries a very rich guy. She moves with him and she feels like her life is about to change for the better, but shortly after they marry, her husband dies. And now she has the feeling that, you know, the whole people that work in the mansion, like the whole staff, is against her. Like even the people in the village resent her. Inside her new home is also a locked door, and what is behind that, it is a figure made out of wood that looks too much like her. So this is a tale of the unsettling, and imagine being just newly married and moving into a big mansion that you've never been to before, and then you have your husband die and everybody else is against you. That's not very nice. This is a Victorian Gothic story with great writing and great atmosphere. And the character of Elsie kind of reflects the expectations that people had in this era, the expectations they had for women. And last but not least, I wanted to include a book that is kind of like a story about a haunted place, but very different. And that is Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. At the end of the day, this book is about an IKEA-like store, which, you know, he had to change the name because obviously trademark problems, but it's basically an IKEA store, and during the night, it is basically a haunted place. The whole story takes place in this IKEA-like store, and apparently during the night, they believe that somebody is kind of damaging the things inside of the store, because every morning they find things are dirty, they are out of place, things are broken. So the manager asks a couple of the workers to stay overnight and try to figure out who is doing this and try to put an end to it. So our main character really needs money, and the manager has promised them a lot of money if they stay that night. So she decides to stay together with another group of people, and soon they will realize that there is something very wrong with that store. The things that happen in the store are quite crazy, but I really enjoyed it. I love the format of the book and how every chapter starts with a different piece of furniture from the store that has, you know, has some sort of meaning for what's to come. And now we're gonna move to the movies, and same as with the books, I wanted to start with a movie that was more for younger audiences and a movie that I remember from when I was a kid, and that is Casper. I think a lot of people have fond memories about this film, and even if you watch it today, I think it's very effective to be fun but also have creepy elements to the story, and I think even new younger audiences would have a blast with it. Kerrigan hires a paranormal expert called Dr. James Harvey to exorcise the ghost from her mansion. The situation changes when Harvey's daughter befriends Casper, a friendly ghost. This movie had a very strong cast, and I will always remember Christina Ricci and Devon Sawa from this film. It's basically the father and the daughter that are sent to this mansion to get rid of the ghost, but then the daughter meets Casper and, you know, she kind of falls in love with him, and so she doesn't want the father to get rid of him. And it's a very heartwarming story. Now let's move to adult horror, and I have a movie that I feel like a lot of times is overlooked and a movie that is kind of underrated, so I wanted to include it here, and that is Session 9. This is an indie supernatural slash psychological film that accomplishes a lot with a low budget. However, it is not a perfect movie when it comes to plot holes and stuff like that, but it is one that I strongly recommend you guys. The plot revolves around a team of asbestos removers who are clearing out an abandoned insane asylum. However, this is not a typical haunted house feature. This is a mind-bending, often confusing psychological thriller that is constantly asking the audience to reconsider the nature of reality. So this is not one of those movies that you would put on the background and you can still follow up what's going on while you're doing other things. No. You need to pay attention to this one. Moving on to a movie from one of my favorite horror directors, we have Oculus, directed by Mike Flanagan. And I think this is a great example of taking something that has been done and overdone before, but give it a fresh spin. And this is the tale of a cursed mirror. A recently released inmate from a mental asylum learns from his sister that the murders he was convicted of committing were actually orchestrated by a supernatural entity, the Lasser Glass Mirror. This movie defies conventions. I think the cast is also very strong. You follow the two siblings in the past when they were kids and in the present, and the plot is that simple. The sister believes the mirror is responsible for the murders her brother was accused of, and she wants to prove it. It's a very character-driven story. Yes, there is blood in it, and I think it's another one of those hidden gems that maybe not everybody has seen. The next one is Shudder, and honestly, I could have done a list of just like 20 to 50 ghost stories all coming from Asia, because Japan, China, like all of these countries, Korea, all of them have amazing horror. When Jane and Tan run over a girl in a car accident, they speed away immediately from the crime scene. However, Tan, a photographer, soon discovers strange shadows in his photos, which unsettles them. This is one of those movies that manages to be really scary and unsettling without having to rely all the time in cheap jump scares. The jump scares that you find here are not overused and they are effective. The film also has great scenes filled with tension. There's also a very clever twist in the film, and it's one of my favorite Asian horror movies. I think this one was also remade, but I have not seen the remake because honestly, I have enough with the original. Now we're gonna go to a classic. I also gave you a classic horror book about ghosts. So let's talk about a classic horror movie, and that is Poltergeist. And this movie was actually produced by Steven Spielberg, in case that you didn't know. The Freelings are a typical unassuming middle-class family living in a peaceful suburb that becomes not so peaceful as the house is caught in the grip of supernatural disturbances. Inside of the family house, strange things start to happen. The pet canary dies, a lot of things are happening. But one of the most iconic moments of this franchise and of the first film is when the young daughter, Carol Ann, is entranced in front of the television. Probably people that have never seen this movie have that image in their minds. The family consults a psychologist, but the psychologist ends up telling the family I think what you need is an exorcist. So that's what they do. This movie has a lot of humanity to it. You follow a very normal family that has been hit with something they cannot control, that it is supernatural. This movie is great. I think if you watch it nowadays, you can still enjoy it and have a lot of fun with it. This is another where I have not seen the remake. I think I even own it on DVD, but I've never seen the remake because I have such fond memories of this original. And I had to include another Asian horror movie in this list because this one is one of my favorites as well, and it is called The Eye, and it is by the Pank brothers. There is also a remake of this one that I have not seen. The Eyes tells the story of a blind girl who sees ghosts after her cornea transplant. She has been blind since the age of 2 and was very excited to get her vision back. She's a violin player and she lives on her own, and she's really excited about the surgery because she is really excited obviously to be able to see again. And when she gets her vision back, there is something wrong with the cornea transplant that she gets that gives her the ability to see ghosts. And this movie was very unsettling, creepy for me. A lot of people found it more like standard, but it really worked for me, so I had to mention it. I like that the story is actually uncomplicated. We don't have a psycho killer, we don't have a really complicated background story of where the ghosts come from or anything. It's something that could happen to anybody. What if you go one day to some surgery and they give you something from someone that it's cursed, or something that gives you the ability to communicate with the dead or to see the dead? It is a fear. We never know what's going to happen to us when we get something transplanted from somebody else's body. The next movie that I have for you is one that maybe some of you have already watched because I feel like this one was popular, and that is The Orphanage. This one is more of a gothic take of horror, but it is by a Spanish director that I really enjoy. Laura and her family move into what used to be her former orphanage. Soon her adopted son Simon tells her that he has 5 invisible friends, but his seemingly innocent games take a nasty turn. Laura and her family move into a house that used to be an old orphanage, and she moves there with her son, and everything is going well until the son tells the mother that he has 5 new friends, and those 5 new friends are invisible, or are they? So Laura actually was in this orphanage when she was young, and she's really excited to go back and move there now with her family and her adopted son, but she's going to make a lot of discoveries about the background of this place, as you would expect when you have such an interesting building with such an interesting history. This movie has a lot of emotions, and it deals with, what would you be willing to do to protect your loved ones. There is obviously the iconic kid figure, that has this thing above his head. I think if you've seen the cover of the movie or any images, you'll recognize him for sure, and it is creepy. It has a lot of heart, and I really enjoyed it. This one is more of a typical haunted house story place with less blood and more scares. And I have left one of my favorites for last, and it's also a movie that takes place in Spain. It is The Devil's Backbone by Guillermo del Toro. I know not many people are familiar with this one by Guillermo del Toro. Most people got introduced to him through Pan's Labyrinth. That's also the first movie I saw by him. People might recognize him from Hellboy, The Shape of Water, and all of that. But if you go back to this movie, this is peak Guillermo del Toro horror. Set in Spain in 1939 during the final year of the Spanish Civil War, the film follows a boy who is left in an orphanage operated by Republican loyalists and haunted by the ghost of a recently deceased boy. So this has a similar backdrop to Pan's Labyrinth because we have the Spanish Civil War, and it's also again told from the perspective of a young boy. I mean, this was supposed to be part of a trilogy. This was the first one. The second one was Pan's Labyrinth, so it makes sense that it all connects. However, this one is less heavy on the fantasy aspect of it and how children tend to find, ways of escaping reality and trauma, which are part of the themes from Pan's Labyrinth. From the very start, you get a very creepy uneasy feeling, and it has great atmosphere from the get-go. We follow a boy called Carlos that lives in this orphanage, and he overhears the adults talking about an unexploded huge bomb that is on the courtyard. Now, this movie has a lot of symbolism, of course, related to the Spanish Civil War, so there's a lot of things that a lot of people might miss when watching this movie, but the ghost and the whole backstory and everything is so eerie, so full of emotion. I really strongly recommend you this one, especially if you love the other Guillermo del Toro movies. This is almost like the perfect ghost story, so if that's something that you love, ghost stories, you need to try this. Alright, you guys, so those were all the books about ghosts and all the movies about ghosts that I wanted to recommend you in this video. Let me know down below if there is any other recommendations that you have for me and anybody else in the comments that is looking for more recommendations. I hope that you enjoyed this topic and this video and the things that I recommended. Thanks, you guys, as always, so much for all your support, and I hope to see you all, as always, in our next coffee time. Bye!